Hi, I'm Dr. Renato Yusolidum Jr., Undersecretary of the Department of Science and Technology and Officer in charge of the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology. In this session, participants will be able to do the following. Use Geoanalytics PH to conduct summary single hazard assessment for population and institutional exposure to natural hazards. Use Hazard Hunter PH to conduct multi-hazards assessment, visualize earthquake plots, overlay and download hazard maps. And lastly, discuss how to use the GeoMapper PH or the Situation Data Mapper prior to a typhoon or a natural event. We have to know the different hazards in the Philippines. The Philippines is part of the Circum-Pacific Ring of Fire and is the place where many tectonic plates would interact, causing not only volcanism, but also earthquakes and tsunami generation. We are also part of the typhoon belt. Hence, we are prone to many tropical cyclones, with an average of about 20 tropical cyclones entering the Philippine area of responsibility. Now, we will learn how to use Geoanalytics PH for P-disaster scenario building. For Geoanalytics PH, you may go to geoanalytics.georis.gov.ph or simply search Geoanalytics in Google. We could perform LGU-based hazards assessment through the platform. Here is an example of doing area-based analysis. We see that in Subic, Zambales, about 80% of the land is not prone to flood. Barangays prone to flooding may be assessed as the land area in square kilometers, as shown in this slide. In the same area, in Subic, demographic analysis may be performed. Based on susceptibility to flood hazard information, approximately 26,000 people may be affected by flood. Affected population, based on sex and age groups, may be generated using demographic analysis feature of the system. For example, we see that from the total population, 2,756 female aged 41 to 50 are susceptible to flooding. Here is another example using tsunami hazard. Here is the tsunami hazard inundation map for Barangay Central, Mati, Davao Oriental, as produced by Geoanalytics PH. Based on the information in the database and calculations made by the system, 6,040 people, or 17% of the barangay population, may be affected by a tsunami. Based on sex and age groups, we may also extract the number of men, women, adults, youths, or children. If one wishes to determine the number of people affected based on tsunami wave heights, the table above, the demographic analysis, is also automatically computed and may be downloaded. We just want to highlight one good example of the use of GeoRisk Philippines platforms by a local government unit, Surigao City. They informed us that they performed demographic and location-based analysis and produced LGU-specific hazard maps using Geoanalytics PH as shown in the figure. Tables, graphs, and maps produced or accessed were attached in their disaster risk reduction and management plan. Considered as the forefront and darling application of GeoRisk Philippines, Hazard Hunter PH, hazard assessment at your fingertips, has now several features since its launch in 2019. Let me show you some of the salient capacities of the app. 1. Hazard Hunter PH can perform multi-hazard assessment using information from the different government agencies. It can generate maps showing the location of the area of interest with respect to the nearest active fault and active volcanoes and nearest critical facilities. It can also generate reports with explanation and recommendations. For example, this has been used by Vigan City. Also, other commercial establishments has used Hazard Hunter PH to assess their own properties. 2. It can perform quick volcanic hazards assessments, including an assessment on the measurement of critical facilities or barangays from an active volcano's eruptive center. Here we see elements at risk to lahars from Mayon volcano. On the map, schools are displayed with respect to Mayon volcano. number of people, barangays, schools, and health facilities that may be affected by volcanic hazards, including lahar, lava, pyroclastic density currents, may be extracted using Hazard Hunter PH. Reports in PDF, CSV, and Excel versions may be generated as well. Here we see an example for Taal volcano. 3. It can display earthquake plots as recorded by the Philippine Seismic Network. Using the Events Monitoring Display option, one might choose date range, magnitude, and depth of earthquakes. The total number of earthquakes based on the query is automatically displayed. Size of circles indicates the magnitude of earthquakes, while the colors indicate the depth of occurrence. When you click Volcano under the Events Monitoring module, you would see alert level of active volcanoes. Here are some value-added information. When we have information like earthquake plots, active faults, liquefaction, and school location in one platform, we could easily perform hazards assessment. In this example, with the location of earthquakes, active faults, and schools, we could surmise which DepEd properties may have been affected by ground rupture. Similarly, we could also determine schools possibly affected by liquefaction, as shown by the light yellow-orange polygon. 4. Hazard Hunter PH displays peak ground acceleration and spectral acceleration that may prove beneficial to structural engineers and planners. 5. Hazard Hunter PH now displays earthquake hazard-safe open spaces. With the help of PHIVOLCS, NAMRIA, and LGUs, the Safe Open Spaces map for Metro Manila was generated to provide residents of LGUs information for development of DRR, contingency planning, among others. Shown on the map are the polygons for safe open spaces, the location of the Valley Fault System, and the administrative boundaries of LGUs. Zooming in, we see here dark polygons as areas where individuals can take refuge to in case of a strong earthquake occurs. The result was heavily dependent on the base maps or imageries used by NAMRIA at the time of processing. In the future, we would want that the imageries may be updated often and that calculation to determine safe open spaces against earthquakes for the whole Philippines may be done automatically. 6. Hazard Hunter PH may be used to download hazard map layouts from PHIVOLCS. Example, if you want to get more information about the parameters and sources used for mapping tsunami in a particular area, you may go to the Download Maps module of the system to download for free the maps in PDF, JPEG, or KMZ formats. All the hazards information used in the map layouts are the ones consumed by Hazard Hunter PH for hazards assessment. 7. Hazard Hunter PH may now also display event-specific pre-disaster risk assessment, or PDRA, as submitted by MGB. We did this first during Typhoon Ulysses, where MGB submitted pre-computed list of areas that may be affected by rain-induced landslides and floods because of Typhoon Ulysses. Recently, MGB also submitted PDRA for Typhoon Oring. Important advisories from PHIVOLCS may also be accessed using Hazard Hunter PH. Using information from the National Exposure Database for more granular information, example schools or LGU buildings, information on typhoon track from PAGASA, information on costs from relevant government agencies, and information on hazards from PHIVOLCS, MGB, and PAGASA. Prior to the passage of a typhoon in particular locations, the government may already determine ahead of time actions to be undertaken. Here we see the number of schools affected by passage of Typhoon Ambo at 4 a.m. Then, the effect of the typhoon at around 6 p.m. and about 2 a.m. In summary, the GeoRisk Philippines has 3 online platforms: the GeoAnalytic PH, the Hazard Hunter PH, and the GeoMapper PH. Each of these has specific functions for pre-disaster, hazard, and risk assessment. Thank you very much.